After the mission on the Purgatory, the Normandy crew didn't really have much to do at the moment. Cerberus was still looking for signs of collector activity and had nothing solid as of yet, so Shepard was left to her own devices. Without a solid mission or goal pushing her forward, the human commander was taking the time to get to know her team in a more relaxed setting than rushing to a mission or in the middle of a firefight. Well, she tried to anyway. Even with nothing pressing going on, running a ship was still a very involved job, so she only had a few minutes to talk to everyone. Still, the general crew were easy enough to get along with even if she didn't get to know them very well yet. Jacob continued to live up to her first impression of being a through and through Marine, jock attitude and all, although to his credit he didn't seem particularly xenophobic. Rather it was the politics the Alliance had played and their inaction after Eden Prime that had driven the young man to join Cerberus. Short-sighted in Shepard's opinion. Especially since Cerberus usually had so many rogue cells that went against human interests, but she knew just how hard it was to do nothing when you saw something wrong and you were ordered to do nothing, so she didn't judge him too harshly. If anything, Shepard hoped Jacob's attitude rubbed off onto more Cerberus operatives. Mordin was interesting to talk to. The Solarian had basically moved into the science lab and greatly enjoyed playing with the various state-of-the-art equipment found inside. He did have a habit of going into great detail on what he was doing though, and while Shepard wasn't an idiot, advanced biochemistry and gene sequencing was not something she could talk about other than just smiling politely and nodding along. She hadn't had much luck talking with Jack or Miranda either. The convict had been dismissive and hostile during the brief conversation they had, but she had appreciated getting access to the Cerberus databases, so there was at least some progress getting Jack to open up. In contrast to that, Miranda had gone back to being professionally distant. Evidently she had not appreciated Shepard handing out access to restricted files. A part of Shepard fully understood why Miranda was bothered, as she would probably feel the same if it were Alliance databases, but on the other hand it was still Cerberus files, so fuck them. The whole situation would probably give her a better read on her XO anyway. Since Miranda was determined to track exactly what Jack was looking through, it meant she was also reading those files. If Jack found anything damning, then the black-haired officer would know it too. What that ended up doing for her allegiances to Cerberus was up in the air, but Shepard was willing to find out. The newest addition to her crew, the tank-bred Krogan that had named himself Grunt, was similarly hard to talk to, but that was mostly because he simply lacked any real experiences of his own for now and was uninterested in the implanted memories, claiming they felt hollow. Besides securing his allegiance for the time being, there really hadn't been much else to discuss with the young Krogan. Although the rather sudden release of the tank-bred might be another reason Miranda was upset with her. She mentally shrugged. Miranda would get over it. Shepard dismissed her thoughts on her team for now. Garrus was busy trying to dig up some old contacts about a potential upgrade to the Normandy's main battery, so she was taking the opportunity to meet with Revan again. The meditation lessons with the Sith had been a great help in calming the Spectre's mind after her death, resurrection, and dealings with Cerberus. She was actually a little scared imagining what trying to deal with her current situation without the elven woman helping her deal with it. When not instructing Shepard, Revan had begun to share some of her experiences during the Mandalorian Wars. Although if she was being honest, Shepard had a hard time imagining the scale of the conflict Revan fought in. She had a hard enough time with a single ship, never mind multiple fleets. Hearing what Revan was capable of could be pretty humbling at times. Shepard entered Revan's quarters for their next session and was surprised to see the Sith Lord in something other than her normal black robes. Ever since Revan had taken up residence in the cargo bay, she had always worn either her robes or armor, but now the elf was wearing some loose workout pants and a fitted tank top. It was such a change in appearance that Shepard wasn't sure she was in the right place for a second. Revan, that's a new style. She couldn't help but say after recovering from her shock. The Sith opened her eyes from her meditative position and looked placidly at the human commander. Is it that surprising? Even I need my clothes washed from time to time. Right, that makes sense. It was easy to forget that despite the billions of credits worth of technology laying around the cargo bay, Revan herself only had her armor and the clothes she was wearing when she crashed. It's a good look for you, Shepard said, trying to recover from that slip-up. And she wasn't lying. Under the armor and loose flowing robes, Revan had the build of someone who spent years forging their body to perfection. She had the grace and smoothness of motion of a gymnast and the restrained power of a martial artist mixed into one, and Shepard needed to stop right now before she ended up thinking just like a certain yeoman. It's fine for now, but I prefer my own style of clothing. Revan replied, idly pulling at the straps of her shirt and giving Shepard a glimpse down her shirt. Shepard felt her face heating up at Revan's flawless skin before she remembered the state of her own, and her feelings took a darker turn. Revan paused and looked up at her. What's wrong? My clothes aren't that upsetting, are they? It was a strange comment, but then Shepard remembered for the 10th time that Revan was an empath. Of course she felt the commander's shift in emotion. Sorry, it's nothing. Shepard deflected. You were going to try teaching me moving meditation this time, right? Where do we start? Revan simply stared at her, one eyebrow raised as violet eyes bored into green. For someone who was supposed to be the equivalent of a Jedi shadow, you are remarkably bad at lying, Commander. So care to tell me why simply looking at me makes you feel such a way? I don't suppose you'll leave it alone if I say it's private? Revan smiled, but it was a cold expression. Forgive me, but the last time I trusted a student when they said their feelings were private, he betrayed me and everything I had created. Shepard had to give her that one. Revan's tale about her betrayal by her friend and apprentice Malak had revealed how deeply that experience still affected the woman. Revan had straight up told Shepard that as long as she was teaching the commander she would likely act like this as well. But Shepard was so determined to stop her own mind from fighting against her that she swore to put up with it. It's your skin. Revan said nothing. Shepard huffed. Damn the Sith for patiently waiting for her to continue. Look, I'm not one to get all bent out of shape over a little scar, okay? Hell, I'm an N7 and half the ground team is littered with them. But I look in the mirror and see underneath the scars is freaking glowing machinery, and it just keeps reminding me that the scars I have are because I'm a fucking science experiment. Shepard took a moment to collect herself, following the breathing techniques Revan had shown her. Collecting the negative thoughts, acknowledging them, accepting them, and letting them go with every breath out. So when I saw you, she gestured at Revan's unmarked skin. Didn't have a scratch on you despite all the battles you were in. Hit me hard. The Sith remained silent for a while. I had wondered about the scars. You seemed to avoid reflective surfaces, but since you didn't seem to mind the others on the crew, I wasn't sure. She eventually said slowly. But surely you have the medical technology to deal with a few scars if you didn't want them? Not on a frigate. Shepard said dismissively, running her fingers over the cracks in her skin. And I can't exactly justify taking us off mission for a few weeks just to get it taken care of at a civilian hospital or the cost of installing the hardware here. It was actually incredibly frustrating. Sure, Miranda said the surgical scars would heal on their own as long as she kept her epinephrine levels low, but that was hard to do when she was running combat missions and when looking at a mirror stressed her out. And all of it could be solved as long as Shepard was selfish enough to ignore entire colonies in trouble to get treatment or rely on Cerberus to install the needed hardware and not hold a debt over her. She would rather chew glass than owe Tim anything. He might have brought her back to life, but she refused to owe him for that. She didn't ask him to, and he certainly hadn't asked her. I sense you have strong feelings about those options. Shepard shrugged. She wasn't exactly hiding that. Revan looked at her for a bit, then sighed and motioned for her to sit on the floor directly in front of the Sith. I had planned on getting you into a more dynamic form of meditation since that's obviously where your preference lies. Shepard cringed a bit at the not-so-subtle dig about how hard it was for her to sit still for any appreciable amount of time. But considering this latest conversation, It seems that we'll have to wait until I correct something first. That had Shepard cringing harder. The last thing she needed was her meditation teacher playing at being a therapist. She was already trying to avoid being alone with Chambers for any appreciable amount of time because she didn't want him knowing what made her tick any more than he already did. And if she was being honest, she didn't want to wind up being seen as some broken soldier needing to be fixed to Revan. After seeing the elf handle being tossed into arguably worse circumstances than herself, Shepard's natural competitiveness refused to let her become dependent on the Sith. Would she do her best to learn the skills Revan had to offer? Hell yes. Rely on her to sort out all her problems? Not a chance. Look, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not looking for a shrink. If you're worried about me going postal on you just because I can't look in a mirror, don't. I'd probably go after Miranda first. Shepard tried to smile at the end to show she was joking. Too bad Revan's serious mind refused to soften any. Good, because I have better things to do with my time and yours than attempt to mimic a mind healer. Revan said shortly. If I was, I would tell you that ensuring your healthy mind, body, and soul requires time and effort before you see results. Shepard opened her mouth, but before she could say anything the Sith Lord talked over her. But seeing as we do not have that kind of time, I am simply going to brute force some of it. So unless you are dead set against it, I will attempt to accelerate healing your scars. Shepard's protests died on her lips. Revan was going to heal her. She knew Revan had kept Garrus alive after he was hit by a missile, but once he made it to the medbay she never offered her abilities again. Shepard had thought it was because she could only affect recent wounds, but maybe she was wrong. You aren't wrong, healing old injuries is magnitudes more difficult than fresh ones. Revan explained after she asked. But surface-level stuff is easier than most. I won't lie though, I don't know how to make this comfortable for you. Do it. Shepard said immediately. Anything to be able to look at herself and not see an abomination looking back in the mirror. Revan nodded and placed her hands on either side of Shepard's head. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath before her face smoothed out into what Shepard had started to learn was a meditative trance. Then she started to feel some slight prickles on her face. Prickles that quickly escalated until it reminded her of the time she accidentally tried sleeping on top of a colony of fire ants during basic. But she grit her teeth and refused to make a sound. She'd felt worse. A small eternity later the feeling stopped and Revan pulled her hands away. Shepard was a little surprised to see the Sith lean forward, sweat running down her face and breath coming in pants. Fair. Not a bad effort for the first session. The elven woman eventually managed. Are you okay? Shepard had to ask. The only time she had ever seen Revan this drained was after she had crashed into a planet and fought through a few squads of Batarian slavers. Fine, healing just takes a lot out of me. Revan replied. Like I said, I'm not a healer. Battlefield medic I can do, but that much concentration isn't something I can do for long. She motioned to a nearby table and a canteen of water telekinetically jumped into her hand. While Revan was drinking, Shepard got an alert on her Omnitool. A message had come in from her old CO, Captain Anderson. Counselor now technically, but he would always be captain to her. And he was asking her to come to the Citadel. Shepard made her excuses and left Revan's quarters in a hurry. She was so focused on getting to the CIC deck that she didn't even think about looking at the results of Revan's work until the elevator doors closed and she caught a glimpse of herself in the metal doors. The deep crevices in her face where just yesterday glowing orange implants could be seen had been sealed and replaced by rough scar tissue. It wasn't pretty, but the lack of light showing through made Shepard feel like even if Revan never attempted healing her again she would still owe the Sith several favors. The elevator doors quietly hissed open, and Commander Shepard stepped through them feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Oh! As it turned out, the fight Shepard was half expecting to break out when Miranda learned about their destination failed to materialize. Coincidentally enough, There was another person of interest Cerberus had marked for recruitment that had just signed on and was waiting for pickup at the Citadel. How a marked Cerberus frigate was allowed to freely operate in Citadel space wasn't something Shepard was very keen on learning. It suggested either a dismissal of how dangerous the terrorist organization was to the wider galaxy or politicking and backroom deals that meant Cerberus's crimes were mostly ignored outside of the system's alliance. Knowing the Council, Shepard wouldn't be surprised if it was a combination of both those and even some other factors. They hadn't exactly cracked down on Batarian slavers despite them withdrawing from Citadel space and still launching raids on member races. Whatever the reason, the Normandy was able to dock at the Citadel with no issues and only the usual traffic that had Joker complaining about half-blind pilots with the spatial awareness of a Hannah and several pointed remarks about their possible ancestry with farm animals. Miranda had assured her that despite her own reservations with the situation, no one would be waiting outside to arrest them all. So once the ship was docked and C-Sec didn't immediately stall the airlock, Shepard allowed for limited shore leave for her crew. Hopefully not enough to cause issues, but plenty to ensure everyone had a chance to de-stress after their missions. From there it was a simple 10-minute ride from the local transit station to where she was supposed to meet with their potential new recruit. Oddly enough, she made it to her destination without being ambushed, or assaulted, or finding her target in the middle of a fight. In fact, things were so normal Shepard did 3 perimeter checks just to make sure she hadn't missed anything. "You are being paranoid." The amusement in Revan's slightly distorted voice was clear. Shepard sent a mild glare at the thin black visor where the other woman's eyes were sure to be. "I haven't met a single recruit for the ground team without everything going to hell. It's pattern recognition, not paranoia," she replied. "Even Jacob and Miranda?" "Met them shooting my way out of a Cerberus medical facility minutes after I woke up. Jacob when we were taking down the security mechs. Miranda when she killed the person who sent them after us. And hadn't that been a fun thing to wake up to?" Revan shook her head, that same mild amusement practically radiating off her body language. "I still say it's paranoia, but we can debate that later. Our new friend seems to be getting impatient." She pointed at the advertisement holo that had been hacked to show the image of a hooded woman. Shepard idly wondered if hoods were starting to become a fashion statement. Between Talai, Revan, and now this woman that was 3 people already. "Commander Shepard, we have the finest companions waiting for you. Perhaps something petite, smart, and Japanese would be your style?" Shepard snorted. You could tell a lot about a person by how they chose to introduce themselves. And she was learning quite a bit about their recruit with this little display. Talented, obviously, if she was able to hack a mid-level security platform on the Citadel just to make contact. Cautious, since she was still making contact remotely. And despite the carefree tone, Shepard recognized the hooded woman was probing for reactions. If she didn't like what she saw, she would likely call the whole thing off. "Well, this is cute," she said as she and Revan approached the projector. The woman's lips quirked in amusement at Shepard's comment, so this was a live feed at least. "Please tell me your password, Commander Shepard." "What, that's it? No custom-tailored hook to draw me in? Or what about a little flattery to butter me up?" Shepard sighed theatrically. "Just straight to the password. I'm hurt, Kasumi." The huff from Revan showed exactly how believable that last part was, but Shepard was having fun while nothing was shooting at her. "You are more fun than I thought you'd be, Shep, but I figured you'd be up for some intrigue. If I knew you'd play along I'd have made more of an effort." The woman crooned. "Kasumi go too at your service, but you apparently already knew that." Shepard smiled. "I like knowing who I'm talking to," she replied easily. "So why the secrecy? You in trouble or something?" She wouldn't judge Kasumi too badly even if she was. She didn't exactly have the right to, considering the people she was working with at the moment. "I'm the best thief in the business, not the most famous. Need to watch my step to keep it that way," Kasumi explained. "I also needed to make sure this was legit." And I have no doubts now, you're the real Commander Shepard. That made sense, but the last bit made Shepard raise an eyebrow. Just like that. How did you know I'm the real one? Like I said, I'm the best in the business. That means being able to recognize important people at a glance. After doing this sort of thing for a while, you get almost a sixth sense for it. Each person gives off their own aura, which is unique. After I met you the first time, I was never going to forget yours. You give off this feeling, like you've seen things that no one else ever has. You met me before? Shepard couldn't remember meeting anyone like Kasumi, but that didn't mean the thief couldn't have been in disguise. Well, met might be a strong word for it. I was in the Citadel for a job a couple years ago and was in Cora's den when your team went after Fisk. Hard to forget you after that. The 15-minute reminder buzzed on Shepard's Omnitool. She had to wrap this up or they'd be late to their meeting with Anderson. Well, glad to actually meet you then. You've been briefed on the mission? She asked. I have. And I'm a little surprised it took Cerberus this long to reach out to me. My fault for being hard to find, I suppose. Kasumi said a little arrogantly, but if she was as good as she was suggesting, then she might have earned the right to be. Plus the hiring bonus of you helping me out was too good to pass up. You know about that, right? And then Shepard was suddenly on the back foot. Cerberus made a deal on her behalf without her knowledge. I guess it slipped their minds. Kasumi continued. The shock on Shepard's face must have been enough of a clue. I'm looking for my partner's old grey box. A man named Donovan Hock took it, and I'm planning to get it back. Shepard crossed her arms. Can't say I recognize the name. A well-respected businessman. Arms dealer, murderer, and generally not a great guy. That was better than what Shepard had been expecting. Going after an arms dealer was way better than some of the other options out there. Although hearing a grey box was involved was a surprise. Those were insanely regulated hardware, usually only available to top-level researchers and spies. Even then, the ability to play back memories like video files was rarely worth the side effects. The alarm on her Omnitool pinged again. She needed to wrap this up. She could get the details from Kasumi later, and she had a basic read on the thief. The rest could wait till later. I can live with that for now. If that's what you were promised, we'll get it done. It'll be fun. If we're lucky, you won't even need to draw your gun. Kasumi smiled lightly and the ad holo cut out and sank down. We should probably wrap this up now though. Kasumi's voice filtered down from the platform above them. You look pretty silly standing there talking to an advertisement. Kasumi was going to be an experience on the Normandy, Shepard could already tell. See you on the ship, Shepard. With that final parting word, the Asian woman turned and walked off, presumably to gather her things, leaving Shepard and Revan behind. So what did you think of her? Shepard asked the Sith. A skilled infiltrator at the very least. And a good addition if you can keep her in line. Revan replied. I imagine she will keep probing exactly how far she can push things if you don't keep an eye on her. Shepard groaned. That's what she thought. Was it too much to ask that just one recruit be normal? Then another thought hit her and she groaned harder. Something wrong? I just realized nothing went terribly wrong during this meeting. She almost whined at Revan. That means this meeting with the council is going to suck. Revan shrugged and started moving towards the gate leading out of the terminal area. I find that's how meetings with politicians disconnected with the state of things around them tend to be normally. The best way to deal with it is make them as uncomfortable as possible in return. Or threaten to replace them, that works sometimes. Shepard was reminded that the woman walking next to her had basically been the empress of her own creation at one point. And she was taking her to meet with the three people that refused to acknowledge anything was wrong until it was undeniably shoved into their faces. Suck was too tame a word for it. This meeting was going to be a disaster. Nothing particularly exciting happened on their way to meet Shepard's old friend. In fact, besides a computer alarm that triggered when the Spectre was scanned by security informing the operator that she was dead, The trip was rather boring. The alarm was cleared with some quick talking by the commander, and no one had even tried to take Revan's weapons. Probably because they were so divergent from the norm here that the system didn't even know they were weapons. Still, Revan was rather disappointed with the lack of reception by the Council for their returning operative. From what she had researched, humanity had only just been included in both the Spectres and the Council in the past 2 years, and yet only a quarter of them had made any sort of attempt to reach out, and not having someone at the space dock to escort them could be seen as incredibly dismissive. Revan wasn't sure if that was somehow requested by Shepard, but if this was Revan's reception after a requested meeting, quite a few politicians would find their careers taking very sudden and drastic turns. That impression only solidified when the two of them arrived at Anderson's office to find that 3/4 of the Council had decided to not attend in person, instead attending the meeting through a holopanel. Revan wasn't sure if this was the same as in her galaxy, but attending by holopanel when distance and time were not a factor was seen as a deliberate snub to those attending. Considering Shepard had messaged back with their expected arrival time, unless things here simply worked differently, the commander was being dismissed as not important enough to bother with. "Oh, Commander. We were just talking about you," Councillor Anderson greeted as they walked through the door. Revan's first impression of the aging, dark-skinned human was that he absolutely did not belong in politics. He had the body language of a military man, a kind of straightforwardness that didn't mesh well with leveraging political influence to advance one's goals. From what she had managed to find out about him before he was retired from active service, Anderson preferred a blunt approach to his goals and actual action to pretty speeches and platitudes. A direct opposite to the rest of his fellow councillors if Shepard was to be believed. "It's been a long time, Anderson. I hope the last couple years have treated you right." Shepard smiled back. "There've been some rough spots. It's good to have you back," the councillor said sincerely. "We've heard many rumors surrounding your unexpected return. Some of them are unsettling." The Solarian councillor interrupted the two humans' reunion. "We called this meeting so you could explain your actions." The Asari councillor spoke up after her companion. "We owe you that much. After all, you saved our lives in the battle against Soren and his Geth, and just like that, any hope of Revan having a positive impression of the Council died a miserable death. Basing their judgment on mere rumors. Not even attempting to validate the facts and treating the opportunity of a simple explanation as repayment of a favor for saving their lives?" Revan was impressed. That was a level of arrogance she had only rarely seen outside the Jedi Council. "The Collectors are abducting human colonists in the Terminus systems. Worse, we think they are working for the Reapers." Either Shepard didn't recognize the insult or ignored it for now. "The Terminus systems are beyond our jurisdiction." They knew that when they left Council space. The final councillor, the Turian one, said dismissively. "You are missing the important part, Councillor. The Reapers are involved." Anderson pointed out, but the Turian wasn't having it. "Ah, yes. Reapers. The immortal race of sentient starships allegedly waiting in dark space. We have dismissed that claim." Anderson began explaining to Shepard that she and her team were the only people that had ever been directly told about or talked to a Reaper. The Council had been unable to retrieve a hologram Shepard had encountered on some planet called Elos before it completely malfunctioned and decided there was nothing suggesting the Reaper they encountered was not a Geth creation. The 3 members of the Council used that lack of proof as evidence that Shepard was clearly not sound of mind and had been manipulated by several parties. While all this was going on, Revan had started to tune out the delusional politicians, but something they said struck a chord with her. She hadn't thought much of the Geth when she first heard of them, considering them to be similar to the droids from her home galaxy, but with how the locals spoke of them as if a technologically superior starship was almost expected, that might have been a mistake. Maybe not so surprising, as Revan couldn't remember if anyone back home had thought to create something like the Geth. And if some random Turian could convince them to follow him into a war with the Council races, why couldn't Revan co-opt them into working for her? After all, A droid race as a workforce would be able to accomplish much more towards creating the fleet Revan had plans for than hiring random mercenaries. Looking into a way to contact them just jumped to the top of her to-do list. That is too far. Anderson snapped angrily after the Asari councillor accused Shepard of treason by working for Cerberus. Shepard is a hero. I'm on this council too, and I won't let this whitewash continue. Realizing she had pushed a bit too far, the near-human quickly backtracked. Maybe there is a compromise. Not a public acknowledgement, given your ties, but something to show peripheral support. She backtracked so quickly in fact that it was almost guaranteed that there was little chance Anderson's reaction wasn't planned for. Especially since it was the Turian councillor who proposed the compromise. Shepard, if you keep a low profile and restrict your operations to the Terminus systems, the Council is willing to offer you reinstatement as a Spectre. It was another token gesture. And Revan could feel Shepard's burning desire to rage at the Council. Only with the help of one of Revan's breathing techniques was the human commander holding on to her temper by the skin of her teeth. Something the Sith Lord was actually proud of her part-time student for. Bearing insults of this magnitude wasn't easy. I accept. Shepard hissed with mostly concealed anger. Good luck with your investigation, Shepard. We hope for a quick resolution. And a quick end to your relationship with Cerberus. With that obvious dismissal, the 3 hollow panels cut out. Anderson swore and stomped off. Interestingly, Shepard decided to turn to Revan instead of following after him. Yes, Commander. You didn't say anything, she accused. Was I supposed to? Shepard narrowed her eyes and turned to Anderson, who had calmed down slightly. Anderson, this is Darth Revan, one of the teammates that are joining me in my investigation. And yes, Revan. I've heard your opinions about politicians. The last time you had an issue with them, you created an empire. She finished with a look at the Sith. I had just finished reading your brief before you docked, Anderson said, giving the elven woman a nod. You are a long way from home from what I hear. Revan nodded back before answering Shepard. I am, although I'd prefer if you didn't shout that to every spy organization on this station in the future. The 2 humans flinched, but Revan reached into her robes and pulled out a small handheld device. Don't worry. The white box should have stopped casual observation, but just keep it in mind for the future. A white box? A jammer of sorts. It broadcasts a large amount of white noise that will get picked up by recording devices. I've tested it enough against the Normandy's equipment to know it works. Going by the look on Shepard's face, she wasn't sure if she wanted one for herself or if she was more concerned with what Revan could get up to with no supervision whenever she wanted. But to your original point, no, I didn't speak to your council. There is no reason to. No reason to? Shepard said, shocked. Revan, I know you've been selling Cerberus blueprints to some of your weapons. But even if we could trust them to not work against us or just hoard everything, they wouldn't be able to make enough to matter when the Reapers attack. We need them. Especially with this latest move from the Council, they may have supported Shepard rejoining the Spectres, but they won't actually do anything. Anderson added, inadvertently displaying his feelings of exclusion from the rest of the Council. And yet drawing attention to myself when they are determined to bury any hint about the Reapers wouldn't benefit anyone. Not when the rest of the Council was determined to insult and discredit you so much. Revan was glad her face was hidden behind her helmet, since the looks of absolute confusion on both humans' faces were adorable. She couldn't help but smile at them. I can tell both of you aren't good at politics, so I'll explain. Hey! I'd say I'm pretty good at getting people to work together. Shepard objected. Personal politics. Revan waved off. An important skill, no doubt about it, but not what I meant by politics. No, what I'm talking about is the subtle gestures and double meanings that allow politicians to warp any conversation to suit their agenda. Something I have an unfortunate amount of experience in since I, as you said, made my own empire. Anderson huffed. I won't argue with you there. I can't believe they tried to discredit Shepard's mental state. That was over the line. Revan shot another smile at the dark-skinned human. The council was insulting you both before we walked in the door. She revealed and proceeded to share her thoughts on the conversation with the council. By the time she was done, Shepard was snarling with anger again and Anderson was looking more and more tired with the whole thing. So they didn't even show up because they were insulting us? Shepard asked again, making sure she heard right. Revan tilted her head. Yes. Back home there were generally 2-3 reasons someone wouldn't meet face to face for a meeting like this if distance wasn't an issue. Revan corrected herself. The first is that the other party is not trusted enough to not harm the participants. If they really wanted to hear what you were doing, they would have made the effort. Any risks of security or safety would have been addressed. The second is that they had already made up their mind about what to say and refused to give you the power of being in the same room to throw off their narrative. Damn it. Now that you mention it, they've dismissed a lot of concerns or proposals I've had in these remote sessions and ended the meeting when I've managed to counter their arguments. Anderson ran a hand down his face. But I don't understand, why hasn't Udina mentioned these things to me? He's actually a career politician. Because he wants your job. Shepard snarled. He was practically expecting it when the proposal for a human counselor went through. My recommendation is the main reason he doesn't have the job right now. Anderson cursed again. Shepard, on the other hand, took a few deep breaths and turned back to Revan. The third thing, What was the third reason they didn't meet us? The reminted Spectre demanded. Revan mused. That one is easy. Deniability. This meeting never happened. Both humans being military and N7S, neither one needed Revan to spell out what she meant by that. With more than half the participants in the conversation being virtual images, any record would be suspected or discredited as a fake should Shepard's status become an inconvenience. And in the event that someone tried to pull the official records? Well, a convenient data purge or failure would make sure they never saw the light of day. All right. Now what? Where do we go from here? Shepard asked. Keep investigating the collectors, Anderson said firmly. I'll do my best to keep the Council and the Alliance off your back. Shouldn't be too hard if you stick to the Terminus systems. I'd also recommend you reach out to some of the more disenfranchised races and try to bulk up their support. Perhaps sell off some of your older starships to the Quarians in return for their aid. Revan suggested to Anderson, recalling what she had read of the migrant fleet and their total dependence on spaceships for their race's living space. Everywhere else in the galaxy they were treated as pariahs or thieves with little justification in the Sith's opinion, so Revan was making plans to secure their help as well. She had rallied plenty of outcasts to her cause on several occasions, and a race with an innate aptitude for engineering and shipcraft was too valuable to pass up. She would need to find a way to diffuse the tensions with the Geth if she was able to recruit both, however. We are struggling to replace the ships we lost during the Sovereign incident. We can't afford to lose more, Anderson argued. Revan shrugged. Just an idea. Although any technology you get from me would likely require an extensive refit anyway, so it might be worth their help in building new ships or refitting the old ones as part of any deals. This sounds far out of my area of expertise. I'll pass word back to the Alliance though, maybe someone else can work out that deal. I'd be too busy here to try it anyway. All I can ask. Revan accepted genially. The Alliance wouldn't wind up under her direct control anyway. She wouldn't demand they listen to all her proposals, though they might end up paying in different ways. Oh. Back on the Normandy, the crew was preparing to leave the Citadel. After the meeting with the Council ended and Udina had dropped by only to be told off by Anderson for overstepping his bounds, Shepard had spent the rest of the meeting catching up with her old CO, so Revan had retreated to a corner of the office to meditate a bit while they talked, and the two of them had left shortly after. Even though the commander obviously wanted to stay longer, it wasn't a good idea to leave a Cerberus vessel in the open where someone with a grudge could take a shot at it. Revan, can I talk to you for a moment? Yes, Shepard. The ship was in its final departure check and it didn't require either of them, so both women retreated to Revan's quarters. What are you planning to do if you aren't going to work with the Council? I'm not stupid enough to think you're just going to be content tagging along on the Normandy forever. The Sith said nothing for a little while, organizing her thoughts. The Council will never accept that the Reapers are real, she said eventually. They will refuse to accept that there is a superior enemy on the way because that would mean they aren't on the top of the power pyramid. And if there is one thing politicians hate more than anything, it is being proven wrong. A faceless enemy isn't enough to spur them into preparing for war, so I think I will need to give them something even they can't ignore when their citizens point at it and say we need to be safe from that. What do you mean? Shepard asked, although she was getting a sinking feeling. I think I'm going to crush the Batarians. Revan's response was so blunt and matter-of-fact that it took Shepard a few seconds to comprehend what she heard. You are going to start a war with the hegemony? Revan shook her head. No, that would be too little. Just outside forces fighting. After this mission of yours, I'm going to go recruiting. The funds I've been gathering from Cerberus and soon from the Alliance should be enough to get started. Once I've gathered enough to outfit a fleet, I'm going to crush the Batarians so quickly and utterly that the Council population will demand that the Council take steps so that the same can't happen to them. You are talking about murdering innocents just to get what you want. Shepard spat. Revan surprised the Spectre by removing her helmet and looking her in the eyes. Shepard could see the Sith's utter determination and deep sorrow in her violet eyes. Yes. Civilians who likely have no idea what is going on will die. But they will be dead anyway when the Reapers arrive. The duty of a leader is to make sure those deaths count for something. The ends can't justify the means. Shepard protested, fighting back a sting of betrayal at Revan's words. This was the same woman who patiently helped her with her mental issues. Now that same woman was talking about killing thousands like it was nothing. Crushing the Batarians is an end to itself, Shepard. Revan replied. A culture based around piracy and slavery won't help us when the fighting starts. They need to be removed before they can become a bigger issue than they already are. Shepard stood suddenly and walked to the door. She paused at the threshold and looked back at the Sith. When I heard some of the stories Edie had managed to research about the Sith, I was convinced they were just made up because of how different you were from them. Now, I can see I was wrong. With that, the commander stormed out of the cargo bay, the door hissing closed behind her. Revan didn't let the comment bother her. She had heard much worse and much truer statements before, and Shepard, for all her accomplishments, was surprisingly naive when it came to the realities of galactic-level warfare. Probably because she had never ordered the deaths of millions so billions could survive like Revan had. Still, the commander would see eventually. And if she didn't, then she could always dismiss Revan from the ship. It might even give her more time to rebuild the empire she would no doubt need to fight the coming threat. With one final sigh, Revan slipped back into a meditative trance. She had a feeling the next mission would be difficult and she would need to be at her best.